popping up out of nowhere. It looks like we didn't add the scene fast enough. The trifecta. I hit the buttons and nothing happens. Gotta love tech. Anyway, so Jake, we're back. We're live. We're here. We're ripping it. It's been kind of a whirlwind last couple weeks with schedules, people busy. I feel like that back to school time is a real accelerator for a lot of people, and capturing the moment and trying to be topical is always fun. So I want to talk today about process, and I want to capture the idea of having a process. And this is kind of originating from as most things do, me observing sports, athletics, and trying to instill in young athletes and young players and people having a pre-approach, having a pre-process, having a thought process that's consistent, and the thought process being perfect, even if you get into the situation like a game or a business deal or a life situation and the outcome is not perfect. Let's talk process, and let's talk what that means to be able to rely on a process and to be able to rely on practices that you put in play regardless of the outcome, and understanding it's not always going to work, but to rely on it, do it, have it, focusing on the success, not the failure. So when I say talk process, what do you got?
There's so much that's going to go into that one. and I want to stay tight on this one and not completely go off the rails.
Yeah.
And my first question for you was, when was it that you had an outcome that came out perfect? Because if you managed that, we need to bottle that.
Well,
So when we talk about that, I bring it up only from the reason I'm picking on him a little bit. In the statement, like, we know it's not. We know that perfection is unattainable. And I think that's the first thing you've got to realize is you can plan for this perfect outcome. You can head for that direction, the perfect game, the perfect lap. If you want to know what the perfect lap is, go watch Ford v Ferrari. That was really a great moment where Ken Miles is talking to his son about the perfect lap and what that looks like. So you plan for it, but does that ever exist? Does a game play out perfectly? And I think some of this mental process that we're talking about is going to come from the fact that you've got to say, okay, this is what perfect looks like, and this is what done looks like. This is what gets me there. This is what the win looks like. I'm gonna plan for 125% so I can get to 100. So that's where I would start to lay out these mental processes a little bit. Is that tracking?
that's tracking with me, man. So let me back up a second. Maybe it's not about a perfect outcome, but when you have a series of consecutive misses, a series of consecutive failures, and I'll use baseball as an example. And one of my teams not doing so well. They're out of the playoffs. I'm sad about it, but hey, I move on. I don't live and die by other people in sports. It's just fun to brag. I told my friend Melvin the other day, I said, man, I just want something to brag about, something else to brag about. So when your average baseball game, like in a professional level, 9 people bat, and depending on how fast everything goes, you could see 3, 4, 5 at bats in a game. You go up there, you have 7 opportunities to do something. You either have 3 or 4, or a combination of both. And 3 strikes, 4 balls, right? 7 opportunities. And or if the 3 strikes come, you only have 3 opportunities. Obviously, you have fouls and all this other stuff that goes into it, but I'm just talking about in general. And if in 4 times in a game, and when games matter, when things matter, and you're trying to have outcomes and you're trying to do things, and you keep not performing, and everyone always says, well, baseball's hard. Well, this is hard. Well, that's hard. The process comes in is how you respond to the adversity of a consecutive string of failures, or how do you capitalize on a consecutive amount of wins, a consecutive amount of micro wins, a consecutive amount of amazing performances. When you go on stage and speak, man, I tanked that time. Man, I was great. I did a movie. Wow, my acting part was amazing. I built a building. yeah, wow, we succeeded in selling it or leasing it or doing whatever we're doing. My point is with process, how to have an internal routine on any level. It doesn't necessarily have to be one of these, hey, let me structure my entire week, be part of the 5 o'clock club, let me get up, let me do this. That could be what we're talking about. But there, at some point, there needs to be a framework that people are operating behind that is on almost autopilot, where there's a daily and a weekly and a monthly organization of activities that help prepare you for the things you're about to engage in. Wouldn't you say? And that's really what I want to get down to. So, do you have any examples of a good process for somebody? Let's say it's a good mental process. Do you have anything that, you know, maybe when some of your clients are struggling or when you come across somebody that doesn't have a routine or a process that's repeatedly done and they can't battle the outcome, they don't have a response for making change. Let's go
Yeah,
there.
absolutely. So I want to hit on something real quick, and I'm going to get into that. We haven't talked about it in a long time, but you said micro wins. And I think that's been like, man, we did a whole episode on this from like, I think it was 7 or 8, something like that in season 1, where we were talking about celebrating those micro wins. So that as part of your process, that needs to be part of your process is understanding what those look like, because a loss is not a singular event catastrophic loss. There's probably a micro win in there somewhere. I'm not saying like flip the whole situation on its head and turn a loss into a win. It's at probably very few times are you going to walk away from, if you're walking away from it, there's a win in there somewhere, right? There's a win in there's some sort of micro win. So you have to look at, all right, what went well? What can I improve on? That in of itself is a process, right? If you examine the situation, you start there and you examine what happened with a loss. You do the same thing with a win. Every single, you look at this, let's go back to baseball. You can go to football, you can go to hockey, pick your thing. What do they do after every game? What does the whole team do after every single game, win or lose? Watch the film. They'll sit down and watch the film, which means they're going to review what went well, what sucked, what do we need to improve on, and it's always these. I'm going to go back to micro again. It's always these micro adjustments, especially when you're playing, you're doing pro stuff. I mean, that's a totally different league, totally different effort. It's different than high school sports. It's different than college sports. When you're in the pros, it is the micro things. It's well, you should have stepped left at this particular thing, and that would have set this play up completely different. It's tiny little things, but they watch the film. So from a process, right? Now you mentioned, do I see people that don't have a process, and how do we deal with that? Yeah, you do. You absolutely do see those people that have no process for managing anything, and you can see it. It just, the world looks like a tornado. Just everything is weird, and their wins are mixing with the losses, and everything is just this weird gray area. So where do you start with that? Where do you start with helping them understand? And this is where I'll talk to you guys today. Every single person here has a process already installed of some form, right? Of some form. Brushing your teeth is a process. You do it unconsciously. You do it the same way every single time. You might do it, slightly different time of the day. Maybe you brush your teeth at 9 and the next day you do it at 10 because that happens to be where it is, but the process is the same. You reach for the toothbrush with the same hand. You reach for the toothpaste with the same hand. You squeeze the toothpaste the exact same way. You either turn on the water and wet the toothbrush, or you shove it in your mouth. Whatever your system is, you have a process for that. So if you feel like you don't have a process, you're like, oh, my business is running off the rails and it's all, chaos and mayhem. And no, it's not. I guarantee there's something you do the same way every day that you're in business, the exact same way. Go back to that. Go back to the basics. We've got a crazy rich dude that we know. that whenever we talk, we hear, and every time I've ever heard, I hear him say it because he was interviewing somebody on stage speaking the one day. And they said, man, our business suffered a catastrophic failure last year. So we went back to the basics. And he stopped and he kind of laughed. And he said, who gave you permission to get away from the basics? And it was it was a mic drop. You had 20,000 people in the room that all went, oh, that kind of hurt, because that's the reality of it. Who gave you permission to get away from the basics? You have systems, you have processes. What are they in your business? Review the film. Go back and review the film, right? What's working? What do I need to adjust in my process? And we're going to go deeper into this, right? Absolutely. But that's what I would tell you is you've got to recognize it. Mike knows. I very recently had an upset, right? Had a loss, took a wallop. What did I do? Went right back to process, went right back to system, went right back to work. It wasn't I need to reinvent, I need to redo, I got to rebuild. No, it isn't any of that. I went back to the basic processes. I licked my wounds a little bit, did what I know I have to do to reset. And typically I got to take a drive where there's no cell phone service. I'll go up and I'll go, wheel up over the mountain. I'll do something to where I'm outside. Look, I know what my process is to reset so that I can reset. So, this is where, let's go back to sports and let's go, because Mike's entire universe revolves around athletics and sports. There's very little that doesn't. Like, what's yours? What's your process? You take a slap to the head. What's your reset process?
So actually, I mean, in my world, there's two processes, right? And because I'm in the youth sports space, right? And I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and one of my my kids always ebb and flow in terms of their performances, and as parents, we want to do what's best for what, at least, I don't want to say best, but we want to make sure that we are imprinting a successful parental process on top. And it's a gamble. Some kids respond to a little more hard nose, some more fluff. It all depends. But I was talking to a friend of mine. I bumped into him the other day, and he was a Major League Baseball retired professional pitcher in the National League, and the guy made a lot of money. He was very good, very successful. He's like 40 and doesn't work, right? He made that much money, and he's super smart with it. And he was walking me through it, and I pulled him aside. I said, "Hey, brother," I'm going to try not to say his name just because, but I said, "Hey, brother, what? You made it to a high level, and in the dog days of when you were younger, and what did your dad do? What did your mom do? What was that driving thing that helped you improve?" And he said, "My dad was always in my corner. If I gave up a first pitch fastball home run, okay, well, what'd you do there? You've got good stuff, you're training, you've got your athletics, you've got your skills, but what did you do there?" So it was almost positive accountability. It was like we talk about watching the film, but it's in my world now, my theme changed and said, okay, let me focus on the positive. Let me hold the negative accountable, but let's focus on the positive components and what works and what doesn't work. And that triggered it in my mind. As a parent, we'll call it down, but as a coach as well, everyone always generically says, okay, what are the wins? What are the losses? What are we doing right? It's what are the wins? But when it wasn't going right for you, what happened? What happened there? What were you thinking? And then if, those questions open up, well, I don't know what I was thinking. Well, there you go. Maybe you should have been thinking. Or, hey, guess what? You're losing concentration. Or, hey, your conditioning hasn't been the same. You've stopped doing XYZ type exercises.
Got away from the base.
This guy was really big on it. And so going into a different sport, the guy, same sports, but more on a different professional athlete, Alex Rodriguez was a third baseman for the New York Yankees for a long time. There's videos out there on him, and obviously if you're not in this ecosystem, it doesn't really matter to you, right? You're not going to see A-Rod doing his thing. But he talks about pregame, he said, my pregame routine had to be perfect. Perfect. I did XYZ with these implements with the bat. I did ABC with the glove. They had to be perfect. Now, the outcome on the field wasn't always perfect. However, I had a perfect process going in. And, he had more wins than not. I mean, I think World Series, this, that, thing, highly ranked guy, all kinds of records. Okay, sure, he had a steroid asterisk in there, but that doesn't matter. That's performance enhancing drugs. That's not process, right? You
Right.
still have to do the routine. You can't just take drugs and not swing the bat. So those of you out there, maybe if you're again a little bit down or you've made some bad moves and some things are going against you, your chances are you've gotten yourself into this. Ground yourself in some routines, whether you put it on a notepad and you have a daily routine, whether you have an every half an hour routine now for a little while that you need to steer your ship, and you're starting to flip from doing this to recreating too much or concentrating on something else, or you're scatterbrained, and understand that. And I don't want to get too deep in processes, but you can have temporary processes that you install to get you over the hump. So now what does that say to you?
And I agree with that one. And you made the point of saying, his pregame routine. And I think that's brilliant. Like there's a book out there called Miracle Morning. If you haven't read that one, that's a great book. That talks all about exactly what Mike's talking about. This pregame routine. It's how you get up in the morning, what you do. So his is a little more on the extreme side for me, but it was literally up at 4:30. And I'm a morning dude, but he was every day at 4:30. Up at 4:30, drink a glass of room temperature water to balance my pH. Do my affirmations, do my gratitudes, write in my journal, do my devotionals. He had this entire map of his morning that went all the way
Sounds like a
out to his
lot.
workouts. It's a huge amount, right? It's a huge amount, but it's his routine. It's his pregame routine, so that at 7 a.m. when he rolled into his business loop, he was firing at all cylinders, period. Like that was his routine to set himself up to do it. And then he could effectively run his systems and his processes in his business at that time. So that's where that pre-game routine comes from. A lot of people, and you'll hear it, right? Oh, I don't function before my third cup of coffee. Well, that's a routine. It's a process. You got to have 3 cups of coffee, and you've told your mind that's what you're going to do. Now, installing temporary processes. I love that concept. Love where you're headed with that. And we see it all the time, right? We see it all the time. Temporary processes. The easiest example is quit smoking. You currently have a process if you're a smoker, right? You have a process and a system with which you're going to do it. How to acquire. Everything is systemized into that. There's nothing random about it. Your body is regimented into a system for that. So you have to install a different system to stop doing it. And usually you can tell my dog is he's back here shaking his ears. He doesn't agree with me at all. Your temporary system for uninstalling the behavior you don't want to have is you go to groups, you do a patch, remember the rubber band thing that everybody used to do. You have to install a different process, and this is where we start talking about habits. How long, and there's different theology on this, how long it takes to install a new habit or process if you do it consistently. And there's a lot of range on this one. I mean, I've heard 28, 44, 66, 128. Pick your author. There's a different day count for what it is. And I think the reality of that is it's because people are different. Sometimes some people can install a habit much quicker than some people can. And I think that's really the reality of that. So the temporary process of getting you to a different outcome is where I would say with that one. So, I mean, how's the quote go? It's the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. The reality of
Right.
that is you've got to install a different process. You've got to
And,
change something you're doing.
so before we continue, I just want to throw something out there as, it's kind of a bonus to our audience. Jake and I we're going to kind of host a special Total Disruption, a invite private invite, and we're inviting you right now. Nobody's selling anything. If you want to get on with us, Jake and I will get on with you live and work through whatever you have. We've got topics we like to talk about, and we want to hear from the audience. So if you want to get on live with Jake and I, right, and get on your episode of Total Disruption, DM us on our Facebook. Our Facebook is what, at Total Disruption on Facebook, right?
That's it.
And
the only Total Disruption on Facebook is pretty easy to find.
Yeah, no. Get on there, do a direct message, just say, "Hey, DM Mastermind," right? And we will get you the details. Nobody's selling you anything. We're not going to take your information and give it to somebody else. There's no pitch here. This is our give back, right? We want a group, and we want to know what people want, and we want to bring it to you live right there. We don't want you to have to wait to get the answers to your questions. Which, as I jump off that, when it comes to getting information, and it comes to these processes, the systems people have to put in place, it's called sustained discipline. You have to realize you're in a situation, and even if you're flying high, you have to realize, like, no one flies high forever. Everyone comes back down to earth. Sure, you get more wins than losses, but you want to make sure when you're flying high, you have that discipline in the processes to check yourself, check where you are. Not everything about a process is all about working away from the negative. It's sustaining the positive, and it's taking control. Because if you're not careful, like even in my life, man, like if I'm not careful, I am on a whipping roller coaster that is not necessarily up and down, but I'm not the thing powering the roller coaster. I'm a passenger in it. And when it comes to life, you want to be the power of the roller coaster. You want to negotiate those loops and hoops and turns and twists. And if you're riding high right now and things are cool, well, here's a checklist. Here's a checklist. Here's where you could start looking at processes. Number one is self-care. How are you taking care of
every bloody time? 100%,
right,
Mike.
Like that's first and foremost. Like, okay, they say your health, your wealth, your this or that, whatever. I mean, literally, what are you doing from sleep to food to movement to walking away from the desk to family maintenance, right? Get all that. If those areas are blowing out the side, right? Some of those areas of your life are blowing out the side. Hey, man, do something as basic as get routine blood work. Go get a benchmark. Get every 6 months. I mean, honestly, why not just pay for blood work every 6 months? If you've got the money, get blood work every 6 months. Know where your body is. That way
it's
you
not
have
that expensive to do it, man. It's not.
anymore.
I mean, you can go to any of your state health fair organizations. You can get a full panel done for, I think it was $120.
Yeah.
Is what it costs us to do that, and then we just hand it to our doctor.
Right. And you have information. That's like basic, right? And the second thing is again with your mental state, right? What's influencing you? What are you listening to? What are you getting in your head? How much self-talk do you have going on throughout the day? Are you responding to conversations, or are you just looping in your head and you're creating your own world inside your brain and you're all over the place? And then obviously as you move down the line, okay, take a look at your financial situation. What are you doing? Where are you spending your money? Where are you making your money? And then it goes into your job and your business and then how to blend all that together. All this stuff takes purposeful dedication, probably an hour or two a week, just to take a glance back and forth. Sometimes it's a half an hour. Sometimes it's 5 hours, right? Like you're in your evening and you're not doing anything. Whip out your calendar, take a look and say, what have I done this week? What am I doing next week?
You're going to find way more value in that than you are doom scrolling.
Yeah.
Like it's not as sexy. Don't get me wrong. It's not as fun. There's no cat videos in your calendar, but that's Mike's right, man. Take the time. The personal development side of things never goes away. If you quit growing and you quit learning, you're just dying. You're just, I mean, you're just waiting to die at that point. I'll just say it. Do I get in those ruts? Of course I get in those ruts. I'm a
Everyone
person.
does.
I'm a human being, man. It's okay to admit that. Am I, do I had a friend of mine a couple days ago because I sent out, I was asking for a review for the new book. And she said, man, it struck me funny because I wasn't feeling this way at the time. She's like, I am just so proud to have a friend that is that driven. And at the moment, I was not feeling driven. I was feeling drug, like 100% in that space. I was forcing myself to do the things I needed to know I needed to do. I could have easily jumped on and done anything else. I could have grabbed a bucket of Ben and Jerry's. I could have, oh, that sounds good right now. I'm kind of hungry. But, I could have easily done that. I could have done anything that wasn't going to benefit or help me grow. But in that moment, it was like, I know I have to do the thing. My executive assistant actually messaged me and she's like, "Hey, you promised me you were going to get this done today." Gave me the accountability of that. I was like, "Yes, I did." So I sat down and I did it. And what came out of it was an affirmation and a boost for me because I was doing the thing. I got a reward, wasn't looking for one, that, somebody just gave me a, non-solicited, here's your bonus, man. And called me driven. It changed the way that I dealt with the rest of my day. It was a big deal. And I could have fought the other way and I'd have just, bleh, but that was a little bit of personal care, was doing the things I know I have to do, that I'm
Taking the
required
time.
to do them.
And sometimes it's do it when it's still feeling good. So, all right, man. Well, we're out of time. Listen, for process, hook us up, DM us on Facebook, search us up here. We're everywhere on social media, but DM us on our Facebook, and then let's connect. Let's get you on Total Disruption. My name is Mike Libercci for Dr. Clendenning. Now it's your turn to disrupt.